Hey guys, Tim and Dave here at the Single Malt Review with another whiskey for you, and it's if you saw the last episode, it'll be looking pretty familiar. What have we got, Dave?
We have is another of the April 2021 releases from Ardnamurchan.
The AD series, which started off as their sort of preview sneak peek range of whiskies that weren't even whiskies because they weren't even 3 years old. They now are whiskies, single malt Scotch whiskies. They still don't have an age statement, and the maximum years it could be is about 7, I think. So that's there'll be a combo of years in there. But every year they come out, they slowly take, they coalesce further and further into what will be the eventual 10-year-old release of the Ardnamurchan whiskey, brought to you by, of course, Adelphi.
This is the 04/21/03 release. No colouring, no chill filtering, not even hints as to what kind of casks are involved, just a number of 46.8% ABV.
Just the goods. No, I always look forward to this time of year because it's about October for us when the AD release and any other hangers-on from Ardnamurchan turns up on the shelves, and we get to see what another year has done to the distillery, and it's usually pretty good stuff. It's Ardna Christmas.
That's a very bright gold colour, I like that.
Yeah, no, it's pretty good. It will be mostly bourbon now that they've moved into more of their production model. No more of this haywire, crazy octave casks, waving tea towels at them, getting them to age quickly as possible, up in the rafters like those very, very few first AD releases. This is now taking shape as to what the distillery style truly is, and I think it's better for it because it means that people can finally find out whether they are followers of Ardnamurchan or not, because previously it was anybody's guess what was coming out. It was just crazy whiskey exiting the building there. So yeah, more of a house style beginning to emerge here, and it's very unique for the style. It's very they've gone way back in time with this one, as you can smell immediately where they've gone.
Ooh,
peaty, yeah. Significantly peaty, but not peated, I guess you'd say. It's not Isla levels of peat. It's not the primary component. It's this sort of rare presence of peat, but not a ubiquity of peat that really only other similarly very traditional distillers, Springbank, sort of over the way on the Campbellton bit there. They still do the practice of keeping peat as part of the recipe, but of
peat
course,
is the seasoning and is not the whole steak.
Yes, indeed. And back in time, that would have been how almost all whiskey tasted, just because of how they were made to, necessarily had to malt the barley. Peat was what you had, and peat was what you used, and then peat was what you got. So it is well and truly what we've got here, along with a huge maritime character. That cursed tasting note of what is a maritime character. What are they even describing? Pulteney has had this problem for years and years. It is not easy to describe, and it's a bit of it's not quite a cop-out. It's just yes, you can say maritime character, but if you don't go a bit further into it, you're going to leave people holding the bag in terms of...
I'm going to get a bit geographical here, but you spent much time around the seaside in Wellington.
Not in Wellington. I don't see a lot of Wellington.
Right. There are some parts outside the city, past the surf beach or swim beaches, where there are just rocks, where you get a lot of mussel beds, and also occasionally a bit of fresh seaweed washes up. And this is reminding me of the smell of that fresh, dark green seaweed that's been washed up onto the rocks. It hasn't gone off or anything, it's still fresh. It's a vegetative, slightly cloying property, and also the mussel beds. So the baby mussels get exposed at low tide. They have this slightly briny, slightly fishy, but again, they're alive and well, so not off-putting.
That's an interesting observation, because one of the primary notes on the nose of Ardnamurchan is oyster shells. And I think that's very, very evocative. We don't really have... we farm oysters in New Zealand, but you wouldn't just see them on the beach, typically. So mussel shells are what we get, which are, in kind, a different variety from those slightly smaller black, the classic mussels from Brussels that you get over there in the northern hemisphere. Ours are big green jobbies. Wee bit different, but still perfectly good to eat. And yeah, there's a distinct distinct. It's more of a dry, sort of washed up on the beach with a bit of driftwood and salty sand. But
I've never heard that oyster shell description for Ardnamurchan before, so I'm going to feel slightly smug and proud of myself for picking up on mussel shells.
Nailed it.
Hooray.
Dunked. But aside from that, there is sort of quite, almost again, tropical fruits. We saw tropical fruits in the Paul Noir edition, and that one was, of course, finished in a champagne cask, so with all sorts of wild cards maybe coming out of that one. But no, here it is again. It's almost to me, it's a bit of a dried guava. Not a mango, guava specific.
I did get a little hint of fruit. There was some pear and some mango for me.
There's a little bit of aniseed, a little bit of licorice. There's a lot going on.
I've just taken a fairly big sip, so I'm keen to go in on about it. But there's a very sherbety fizz straight up, which is replaced then by some peat and peaty smoke and some char. And then that gives way too, and there's a mixture. There is lemon meringue, there is a bit of salty seafood, but not in a horrible clashing way. But you think of, imagine those foodstuffs. It's a kind of a sequence of those various flavours. It's a little peculiar. I have to take another sip so I can articulate that better.
No, it's initially quite sweet and quite rich, but it ends up in a fairly dry, fairly brittle kind of location. And that peat is very mineral. It's not a tangy peat. It actually is reminding me a little bit more of Ardmore peat, mainland peat, and I think I need to actually go and do my research to see where the peat has come from here. I don't think this is Isla peat. I think this is mainland peat, and that's where we're getting this dry minerality from.
That's almost like tells a story. Have just a bit of fresh citrus fruit as a starter, then sit down next to the driftwood fire on the beach, then have some smoked mussels and some salted bacon, and then finish off with another few slices of fresh fruit. It's like a whole night out in a sip.
Very evocative.
Yeah, there's a
I
lot
wonder how
going on
water
there.
treats this one. Start with just a moderate quantity. Remembering this one doesn't have a full 57% ABV to play with like the last one did. Fruitier.
Oh, yeah. It's a little danker, but not an off-putting
There is a
way.
wee bit of a dankness there. It's gone. It's a wetter whiskey there. That dryness has been brushed aside, and there's a rich juiciness in there now, and
Yeah, there's a bit of old kelp on the seashore now.
way more licorice as well. Almost getting into licorice all sort territory, because it's quite a sweet licorice.
Yeah, we're getting hints of the salted Dutch licorice. Actually, the peat, I guess, is contributing to that brackishness.
I almost need to go back and watch the video for last year's release, because of course I didn't keep any. I'm not a whiskey collector, I'm a whiskey drinker. But yeah, I will have to see on our notes there to see in which direction this has gone, because this is definitely more complex and it's definitely smoother and rounder, which makes sense given that it's had a whole other year to evolve in the barrel house. But yeah.
Speaking of evolving, that has gone places that in that water. The peat has been wildly softened on the nose and on the tongue too, but now, instead of that progression of various sweet and salty and smoky flavours, the overwhelming taste now is a flavour which reminds me of the smell of coal smoke. That's, again, some degrees of separation.
Touch of the reeftons on this one.
Yeah, it's if you take that smell of burning coal, turn it into a flavour, and there is a hint of that on here. And it's more than a hint. It's
so
kind of a driving force now.
That minerality really running the whole breadth of the flavour here. It's really difficult. I'm trying to think of something I can liken this to, because so very few people have tried Ardnamurchan whiskey, but something that's analogous, and there kind of isn't. I think it's probably most like if you crossbred Ardmore. I think the peat and the mineral quality is very Ardmore. The maritime style is a bit like a Pulteney or even an Oban, but much drier. Those are much sweeter whiskies than this. The maritime influence here is much stronger. I think in the coming years, this may take the trophy as the when describing the aforementioned cursed maritime tasting note, which Dave had to elicit an entire mental journey to actually properly describe, which gives an indication of how complex and how pointless a tasting note it is on its own. It needs so much more description than simply maritime. I think this may well come to be seen as the Flagstaff whiskey for maritime character. I think it probably is already. It just isn't very widely tasted yet. So we will see. But I think it may well take that trophy as the maritime whiskey especially once it's got a number on the bottle, which I suppose makes it official. We might be seeing such accolades. As it is, though, it's a really, really good and very, very complex whiskey to sort of chew over, think about. And if you've had the previous AD release, it's a really good one to sort of watch evolve and grow. A more analytically sensible-minded whiskey drinker would keep a small library of these so that you could sort of compare the colour, see things evolve, and do vertical tastings of them. We might be lucky enough to get a vertical tasting set because I'll bet they're doing this hard. They know I'm an idiot. They know I'll come back and buy a box set of little minis to go on the time journey.
If we fast forward to the middle of the century, I'm sure there'll be the Ardnamurchan Journey Pack, which contains every 5 years worth of starting at this release and all its future incarnations up to age 40, and it'll cost more money than, well, any of us will be worth. But
maybe. So, we'll see. We have a mighty YouTube empire by then. We'll be fine. Pay for itself. So, scores. Tricky for me to do, and I'm going to ask you to do it first.
Sure. Well, again, I'm really happy with this one because it's, because it is intriguing, because it makes me think and feel, and it just takes you on a whiskey journey. It combines familiar properties and familiar characters with a few surprises and a few detours and diversions. But it's not just something radical and outlandish just to be confronting. No, instead it's a nuanced and expressive dram, which is a roundabout way of saying I rate it 90 points. Same as the previous Ardnamurchan tried. This is a young whiskey, but it's got so much going on without being a jumble. It is laser focused.
I'm going to cop out and say I feel very similarly. I don't think I could articulate it any better than you have. This one, I always know we've had a really special whiskey when it really activates the Dave, when it activates the flavour complex of Dave's mind, and he starts going on actual physical mental journeys in order to find the flavour. That's when you know you've got a good whiskey. And I tend to agree about the score as well. I can't quite go to the 90, but I can go to an 89. Very, very close behind. This is a whiskey that is tremendously good now, and trying to think, get in the DeLorean, go 70 miles an hour, whatever you have to do, and envision this as a 10-year-old or older. That's going to be an absolute stunner of a whiskey. I hope I can still afford it because I should mention as well, they're managing, and in a very, very un-Adelphi move, to keep the price pretty low on this. This is whiskey that anyone who can afford whiskey can afford this. They won't ding you too hard on this one. So if you are interested, I think it's well worth having a scrounge. They don't make a lot of this, and I'd say if you can't find it, don't go to the aftermarket, don't go for an eBay, because then you will be paying a whole lot of money to the wrong person. And all you have to do is wait till next year, and you'll have a similar but 1 year's worth better whiskey to enjoy. So if you've missed it this time around, which you may have because it's been on the market for a month now, never mind, catch it next year, and it'll be all good. Right, and you can catch us next week. We'll have something else scrummy for you then. It might be similarly island-y themed, isn't it? All right, well, check you back then. Slanger, this has been the Single Malt Review.